who do we stand for? We stand for cancer patients and their families. Getting to the point of clinical testing and getting to the point of measurably converting cancers into curable diseases. That's our goal. Why are you doing what you do at the Parker Institute? Because we can cure cancer and people need it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OncoDaily. Today, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome Karen Knudsen. I don't think she needs an introduction in the oncology space, and I'm sure also beyond in many other areas. Right now, she is the CEO of the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, and I'll leave it to our discussion to explore her journey throughout all her career. Thank you very much, Karen, for having a time for us.
Absolutely happy to be here.
I'd like to start from your journey, from the beginning. How it started.
All right. Well, I'm a scientist, first and foremost. I don't remember a time not thinking about being a scientist, although I'd never met a scientist. I think it was just one of those scenarios where, naturally driven by curiosity, but curiosity toward the concept of improving human health. So, my first experience in the oncology world was in college in Washington, D.C., as an undergraduate at George Washington University, where I had the good fortune to work with a mentor who recognized how much I enjoyed science. I had worked in his lab, and this was in the late 80s. And he, at that time, said, look, there's so much going on at the National Cancer Institute. Why don't you consider going there for a summer? So I did that. I worked at Frederick National Laboratories and started working in a lab focused on TY1 retrotransposition. So if you'll remember, in the 80s, this was a time when the AIDS epidemic was really in full throttle. People didn't understand retroviruses. And this laboratory was studying TY1 retrotransposition in yeast as a way to try to understand retrotransposon activity. And as a result, everything associated with HIV and HIV-related cancers. So I started to get a little bit addicted to this strategy of using the rigor of yeast genetics to solve for human problems. So when I went to go get my doctorate at UCSD, that's what I did. So I worked in Schistosaccharomyces pombe, so a very advanced yeast, as distant from baker's yeast as it is from humans, but like human genes, they can be spliced, they're regulated in a similar way. And this was at the time when all of the genes associated with cell cycle were being identified. So I was given a random mutant that had been developed in pombe that was radiosensitive, and through complementation could clone the gene. And so I cloned RAD1, which is part of the 911 complex. And this put me on the path of really thinking through DNA damage checkpoints and how it related to human disease. And this is, of course, related to cancer. So, when I went to my fellowship lab, which was really kind of the pivot point in my career, was Webb Cavaney, an Academy member known for identifying tumor suppressors as actually existing through the retinoblastoma gene and studying retinoblastomas. He really wanted to start a prostate cancer program. And this put me on the path of translation. So, at the time, this is when women were asking for more funding for breast cancer research, as they appropriately should, right? And that happened in the early or mid 90s. And what Dr. Cavaney pointed out to me is that prostate cancer is a real issue that wasn't being addressed. That there were, it's the number one diagnosed malignancy of men in the U.S. and the second leading cause of cancer death. And that what we needed to do was to design a translational program to do something about it. So that started in my fellowship, and it was a hallmark of my entire career. What I understood was cell cycle. So in his lab, I was the one who identified how it is that androgens control cell cycle and survival in prostate cancer. And this led to some targetable pathways that then I brought with me in starting my own laboratory in Ohio. My first faculty appointment was at University of Cincinnati School of Medicine. Great place to get started. All these, vibrant, phenomenal people were hired into the cancer center at the time to get our labs up and going. And, from there, really started to focus on very translational aspects in cell cycle, DNA damage control, and transcriptional regulation, because transcriptional regulation downstream of the androgen receptor is what the therapeutic target is for all men with metastatic disease. So it was there that I really started working hand in hand with urology, with medical oncology, with radiation oncology, and with pathology, and building teams. So this then became, I would say, the second major pivot point for my career is team building around translational science and multidisciplinary research, and then starting to write clinical trials. I was recruited to Jefferson Health at that time to do that same thing. They found themselves with incredible individuals in the prostate cancer arena, but needed someone who wanted to build a team of the science and the clinic to make the pace of discovery faster and benefit people. And that's what I really care about. So I was recruited to Jefferson initially in that score, built the prostate cancer program, became the first vice provost of Thomas Jefferson University, and then the deputy director, and finally the director of the Cancer Center, and EVP of Oncology Services. So this was although I had a lab the whole time, transitioning over in much more into converting science into patient care. So I started off in that role running one of the NCI-designated cancer centers when we were quite small, a large biomedical university, but the hospital footprint was small, 3 hospitals in downtown Philadelphia. Cancer care was delivered only in one of them. And I look back in those days and I wonder what I did with all my time, because under this highly entrepreneurial CEO, we started to grow. And we grew to a 16-hospital, wholly owned and incorporated system by the time I left, and had the pleasure of leading both the clinic and the science. I think those two things go intimately hand in hand. The more that we convert science to people in the same form of clinical trial for prevention, detection, and cure, the better off our patient population was, and the better quality of care we could deliver. And I was very proud of putting clinical trials out into the community and setting up advanced care hubs, something that really hadn't been done at the time, and the NCI-designated system, and made possible because I had such a visionary CEO that I reported to in this large health system. So did that, but then also the scientists benefited because, anyone studying a rare disease all of a sudden had a large patient population where they could find what they were really looking for and people they were trying to help. So I saw the benefit of that. I love healthcare, and the science of converting science to people. I thought I would do that my entire career. I still love that component. To me, that's why you do science. You do science to help people. I thought I would do it my entire career. And then I got this call one day, the next pivot point, from a recruiter looking for the next CEO of the American Cancer Society. And they were in need. They had gone through from a transition from a federated model of many different iterations of the American Cancer Society into one. And that it still had yet to emerge as a vision. They had lost money 7 years in a row, fired people 7 years in a row, and needed to redefine their role in oncology. I was the first one to ever run an iteration of the American Cancer Society to actually come from oncology. So that's what they were looking for, and someone who knew merger and acquisition. So took it on, successfully transformed that organization into the modern era. New mission, new vision, new structure, anchored around research, advocacy, and patient support. We grew in impact. We grew in the revenue that we needed to generate to create that impact, significantly so. And we did all of that with 1,000 less people than the American Cancer Society had ever had. So felt really good about the position of that organization and ready to hand it over to someone who could really maintain the organization as it was and could be a good steward of that. It's such an important organization. My last pivot point was to really position myself more fully in that engine of innovation and entrepreneurship, back to getting science to people. So, I was actually destined to go somewhere else. And then in came Sean Parker as I was pen in hand, getting ready to sign somewhere else. Because that is our model. Our model is to fund high risk, high gain, ambitious cancer therapeutic science, immuno-oncology and adjacent, right? Anybody can do that. Anybody can fund research, but that's not what we do. We fund the science, but in a way that allows us to accelerate the innovation to people. So the second part of 3 is that we actually embed in the technology transfer office. So we can identify not just within one investigator or one institution where the potential game-changing idea is found, but we can connect it to other discoveries that are happening across our network, across the country. And then we either license that technology, which we do, so that others can take advantage of it, or we start our own companies. So there are 17 companies in the Parker Institute portfolio. And, we have ability to de-risk the science because we've seen it from the very beginning, and to accelerate the time to getting that into patient testing and the ultimate goal of commercialization. So we've put in close to $400 million in our 17 companies, with more than 4 billion, getting close to 5 billion raised with our co-investors. And so that's really our model. So the arc has been science, develop the translational chops to get science to people, determine how to build teams to get that done. Now bring in new stakeholders, the lay population, the patient population, really learn from them and understand what they need through healthcare, understand actually what it's like to implement science in healthcare. There are a lot of stumbles that people make there. And then move yourself into a position where you can have maximal impact. That's it.
I mean, you concluded it in a very simple way. That's it. But that was a huge journey, which is continuing. I mean, being the CEO of the largest national organization, which that position could fit, I don't know, maybe former Secretary of Health or Foreign Affairs but I mean, I want to take also your perspective on, you were running this large organization and you build it up to be a very successful, and also in terms of the business model. But now you are, I mean, again, it's a big adventure, or challenge to kind of build these new organizations, and have them succeed. But what's the difference? Is it much different to run thousands of people to go to a smaller one?
So that's a great question. And I think the difference is where each one of these businesses were in their own business life cycle. For the American Cancer Society, they'd been around 100 plus years, all doing very good work in the world, but they were truly separate organizations. I remember my mother volunteering for the American Cancer Society in Texas when I was a kid. But what she was touching and feeling was that part of Texas version, which is completely distinct from the part that I was touching and feeling as a healthcare executive in Philadelphia. I felt really passionately about the American Cancer Society because of what I could touch and feel every day. If I needed research dollars to spark a new project, a new idea with one of the investigators in my cancer center, the American Cancer Society was there. When we wanted to work together with other organizations on policy that could benefit access to cancer care, this is where the American Cancer Society was just irreplaceable. But where they really showed me what could get done with a good strategy in Philadelphia was on the every given day. So I ran oncology in one of the safety net hospitals, the only safety net hospital in downtown Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson University. We had patients who couldn't come to the chemotherapy center 5 days a week because they didn't have a ride. We had patients who couldn't get access to quality care because they didn't have a place to stay. I really enjoy taking teams that are good and allowing them to become great by seeing a different vision. And in the case of ACS, it needed to decide, what does it want to be? Of all the things you could be, what do you want to be? So it needed business rigor at the end of the day. So at ACS, we really had to start foundationally. And we, first decision, who do we stand for? We stand for cancer patients and their families. And that was a really important declaration, right? Because we don't stand for scientists or health systems or they're really important parts of our sphere, but who do we stand for? And then I'm a big believer in mission and vision statements guiding your organization. So a major, major hurdle for us was redefining the mission and vision. So we created the mission around something that I believed we did every day at the American Cancer Society, and that was improving the lives of cancer patients and their families. And how would we do it? Through research, advocacy, and patient support. And those became the three pillars that we redesigned the organization on. Yes, you need to fund the research, super important. And but there's also the care that's available right now that people can't get to. So patient support, which is our biggest team around the country, needed to become a vertical with a visionary at the top. So I actually served in that role for a while until I was able to find just the right person, Dr. Arif Kamal, who is just a wonderful human being and a palliative care oncologist who understood research as well, and to serve in that role to oversee the patient education, the patient navigation, transportation, lodging, all of the really important things that allow people to survive care because they can get to the care that we know about right now. So each of those are driving towards different things. But then the real power of the American Cancer Society, in my opinion, is ACS CAN, which is the 501c4, the advocacy arm. Because at the end of the day, the durable solutions are found there. So the thing that needed the least change at the American Cancer Society was that, led by a phenomenal human being, Lisa Lacasse, the president of ACS CAN, and he's the CEO of ACS CAN as well. What we needed to do was infuse the advocacy decisions, federal and state level, where we were very successful in having legislation passed, like ridiculously successful, infused by the science and informed by the cancer patients and their families. So in this way, every day we could improve lives through research, advocacy, and patient support. They were measurable, and putting measurable goals behind that was what made us successful. But what also made us successful, because we were very clear about what we were going to do and what we were going to not do. And that was what that organization needed. But we also were very clear about what success looks like. And we decided our vision statement should be, which is the success looks like, ending cancer as we know it for everyone. And I called those the 8 words that defined us. And because it took a while, right? Because people were all over, employees in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and Guam. And they had all previously experienced like a different view of the American Cancer Society. So now how do we get everybody to see a common vision? You had to be there. So I was on the road 49 weeks of the year, 4 years in a row. And to get people to see a common vision, not just the people who worked at ACS, but our key stakeholders, the scientists, the health systems, and then the people we were doing this for, the patients, the caregivers. It was a lot. It was a lot of work for myself and my executive team. We were on the road relentlessly and emboldened to do so because it worked. So we felt consistently empowered by the fact that was doing more. And ultimately, I came to realize after 4 years of growth, very strong growth, that we had the right metric. We had the right strategy. I love strategic planning. It's also something I really enjoy because, how are you going to get there without a plan and then have the finances rolled into that plan? Again, business rigor, all centered around patients. I felt like we'd done it. I felt like I'd accomplished what I came to do, and that I still had more to build. And I think the building at the American Cancer Society was complete, and who knows what will happen under a new leader. But I feel great about the impact of what we did. So this is a unique model. It's as radical as it is simple. So what I've got, instead of people all around the country, I've got a phenomenal, high intensity, highly capable, highly focused team from the Parker Institute who's ready for the next level. So it's going to sound familiar. We've started with reshaping our mission, our vision, our 3-year integrated strategic and financial plan, which we call ASCENT. This is not an organization that needs to reinvent itself. This is an organization that's primed to grow, or crank the flywheel, as I like to call it. And we're ready for that. I'm very excited about the learnings that we've had in the last 9 years, what worked, what we need to do differently, what we need to think differently about. This is a speedboat. And that's the level of expectation that that I have for the team. I think it's a level of expectation that my incredible, accomplished, highly accomplished board has for me. And I'm enthusiastic about what we can do. Again, measuring things like the impact of our science, the impact of the technology and discoveries that we have and that we license, and the impact of our portfolio companies in getting to the point of clinical testing and getting to the point of measurably converting cancers into curable diseases. That's our goal. It's bold.
Thank you, Karen. What is the key to your success?
Mm. Well, I think any person with a scientific background is running a business, right? Even if you're just running a lab, you're running a business. You have to have a strategy, your scientific strategy. You're managing people and you're managing budgets. You're also very adept at data handling, hypothesis generating, all of the things that make their key, I think, for business success. And so I think my approach to business is the same as my approach to science. Data-driven, hypothesis testing, but on a quick timeline, having a strategy, understanding that strategy is not something you build on one day and it's etched in stone. It's a dynamic strategy that needs to bend through iteration, but for which you have to hold fast to a core of what it is that you're trying to achieve and to inspire others to see that vision. I think the more that your teams can see the why, why are you doing what you do at the Parker Institute? Because we can cure cancer and people need it. And so we are uniquely poised to get that done because our model lets us go faster. And we are focused on therapy. We are focused on curative intent, which is a really unique and bold place to be. We don't balance our portfolio with incremental science. It really is all about the ambitious science. So giving our team, but also the population that we work with and around, this very clear vision of what it is that Parker Institute is intended to achieve. We're not going to divert from that. That is, I think, what's going to make us successful. And then, there's having the right strategy. There's having the ability to fund the strategy. And then there's having the right people to execute that strategy. That's really essential as well. And every organization, goes through that. And so I'm very fortunate at the Parker Institute to have a phenomenal team already that in place, for which we'll be, doing some adding, but a phenomenal team in place to see this vision and execute on it.
Karen, who are your mentors?
But the person that I leaned on the most, that I really learned so much from, is named Steve Klasko. He was the CEO of Jefferson Health and Thomas Jefferson University. He's the one who put me in place to run oncology, both the science and the clinic, and really empowered me. He told me that I should run oncology like the CEO of cancer, and that he was going to hold me accountable for the strategy I put in front of him, but that he was going to give me free rein to execute on that strategy, run the budget, and if something got in my way, to contact him. And that's what happened. And so I was incredibly proud of what we were able to put together of, it's not so simple when you are acquiring health systems and cancer care units across 2 states that have very different views of how to manage quality cancer care, and to get them to align to a single service line, single quality of care across the system. And then also, if you're going to put specialists and advanced care out into the community, that's a bold step too. It's a very big way of change of doing business out in the community setting. I think we were entrepreneurs in this. And Dr. Klasko was the one who said, Karen, this is the right thing to do. Right? Do the right thing was one of our core principles at Jefferson. All 33,000 people when I was there could tell you on any given day, because it was everywhere, what was the core principle by which we operated. It was be bold, think differently, and do the right thing. And that was what he expected of us every day. In fact, that's what I was one of 10 who reported to the CEO. And that was what your review performance was like. Karen, how were you bold this year? How did you think differently? And tell me how you did the right thing. And when we had difficult decisions to make at the level of the executive team in the cabinet, we would anchor back on that. Is this doing the right thing by the patients who come to Jefferson Health across our two-state system? Now it's 35 people now. So he taught me quite a lot about the importance of having a vision, the importance of transparency, the importance of making sure you have the right people to execute on that vision. And then finally, he taught me about entrepreneurship and innovation. That was something that we were early adopters under Dr. Klasko. And I want to give you an example that I think everybody can gravitate to, and it's telehealth. So telehealth was something that prior to COVID was not heavily utilized around the country because there was no reimbursement for it. But Dr. Klasko knew that this was going to come. This was medical delivery of the future. And so he required all providers at Jefferson Health, irrespective of discipline, to do one telehealth visit a month, and we set up the infrastructure for it. One telehealth visit per month, period. You had to do it. So he was building the muscle of telehealth, and we were structured for it. And then all of a sudden comes COVID. And I'm thanking my lucky stars that we had such a visionary CEO. Cancer care didn't stop. People didn't stop getting cancer during COVID. But what did happen is my patient base, which was already 10,000 index cases per year, grew phenomenally because the smaller operations or operations that didn't have telehealth or didn't have a large staff, like a smaller community practice, all it took was one nurse to be COVID positive and they couldn't see patients. So I needed to grow quickly like this. So we very quickly had to decide who needs to come in, right? Who do we have to touch and feel as a patient? How are we going to manage that? But then also who can we see by telehealth? Patients who got their lab work done next to them in their community where we just needed to go over it with them. Patients who we were just doing follow-up on or needed to follow their treatment plan. So we were able to scale by the 1,000-fold immediately. And that taught me also a very valuable lesson about the importance of not just understanding what's true now as a scientist, as a healthcare person, as a business leader. What's true now is completely insufficient to run an organization. It's what's going to be true 5 years from now. And how do you make it happen earlier? That's the way I think. And I think that way because of Dr. Klasko, who still turns out to be an incredible mentor for me.
Thank you very much, Karen. And who are your mentees?
So my mentees. So I'm really, really fortunate with the trainees who came through my lab during my time in science. I'm very proud to say that almost all of my former PhDs and fellows, be they MD or PhD, are still in academic medicine or in pharma in oncology. So I really like to think that we had the right team then too. And it's nice to see them still connecting with each other in the family. I actually heard from one of my fellows already this morning, right before I got on with you, who was super excited because she just got her first big grant award. So, my mentees, they're like your work family. You spend more time with them than you do with your own family, in science and medicine. So that's one group. I think, the other group is anybody who's been with me on an executive team. So still very close with the executive team at the American Cancer Society. As I mentioned before, we worked hard together. There was just absolute sheer dedication to the mission of the organization, and I couldn't have done it, without them. And although I would say they're my mentees, I would say that I learned from them as much as they learned from me. And so it was really, a great time. I really feel like all of us should be in the mode of two things: consistently learning from mentors and others and consistently giving back.
Karen, one more question. Which is the book which made the most impact on you and you would recommend to read?
Oh, that's a great question. Boy, the book that made the most impact on me. Yeah, I have to think about that one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it was related to science and medicine. Maybe this is an unconventional answer. Okay. All right, good. So, let me give you two. So one is related to science and medicine. One is Deep Mind, and the or Deep Medicine, sorry, the Eric Topol book. I think it's called Deep Medicine. To make sure I got the. Do I not have it up here? How can I not have it up here? Deep Medicine. Yeah. Sorry, not Deep Mind. That's something totally different. So on the science side, Deep Medicine. Yeah, by Eric Topol. I think it's really great. And, got me beyond therapeutic science, and it got me beyond, obviously, cancer, thinking about technologies that are going to change medicine in the future. It's back to that, what are the things that are really going to change us in the future, and what should we be thinking about, and how do we get there faster? So that one I really love. So I'm going to pick that one for my science book. I'm gonna take liberties and pick three. Okay. So for my science book, I'm going to say that from the perspective of business, one that I really loved, because I'm kind of a business geek too, right? I am an MBA and a PhD, right? Is Good to Great. I love that book. It's a classic, right? And you really get inspired by hearing these stories about organizations who were led by phenomenal CEOs and getting them to think differently. There's a second business book, Playing to Win, which I think is like the best blueprint for strategy. So like I'm going to say those, but like books that changed my life. I want to say, because I'm a big bookworm. That's probably why it's so hard for me to choose. Growing up, I grew up in a military family. I'm the youngest. I'm the only girl. Um, I really had I was full of men. I only have sons. I'm full of men in my life. But as a kid, what I really loved were stories or books by Jane Austen. And I loved them because her female characters are really strong. They navigate the environment around them, which expects them to have a very different role in life, right? To be pretty and get married. But they find ways to actually follow their own dreams and follow their own path and hold true to themselves. And so I think as a kid growing up, and she's also quite funny, and I love comedy. So when I was a kid growing up, I found that was one of the early places where I found inspiration of women thinking differently. And I think that's what I try to do as well.
You mentioned about being strong. I mean, when people are talking about you, of course, in a great way, the first thing they say about being very strong. And
Yeah.
yeah, is it also some connected also with your childhood, with the family? Because you mentioned that you grew up in a military family surrounded by men.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, when you grow up in a military family, you're just meant to be tough and resilient. And it's not just any military family. My father was special forces. So he was the first intelligence officer on Delta Force. He was Green Beret. He was, Black Ops most of my life. And so, and then went to go run after he retired from the army, went to go run security for the United Nations in Somalia. So he's no shrinking violet. And that's kind of how we grew up too. And so people usually think, oh, like your dad, he must be the one, you learn all this from. Well, think about the wife of what happens in this kind of family where you're moving every few years. And that builds resiliency for sure. But my mother is just a force of nature in all the right ways. She had to reinvent herself every time we moved, new occupation, new job, new way to think. And she's just a brilliant human being. And ultimately became, when they were able to sit in one place for a while, became a business executive. She was one of the original executives at Williams Sonoma, when helping that grow that gourmet cookware company from, I think it was a 6-store chain when she came in, pretty just running one of those stores. And then ultimately, was running most of the country. And so I learned a lot from her about resiliency, about really being focused on having your personal life and your family be the most important thing to you, but at the same time, you can have a thriving professional career and to not let things get in your way. I think if I learned something from my mom, who I still talk to every day, she's a phenomenal human being, is, to just not see obstacles, and the obstacles in front of you are just an opportunity to think differently. So I'm very thankful to her.
Wonderful. Karen, what would be your advice for a younger generation?
Yeah, I would say follow your dream and your curiosity. I know this, a lot of people say this, but I really think it's true. When you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, yes, it's a lot of hours, but from my perspective, I think if you just follow what really drives you and follow your curiosity without question, and you won't go wrong. All the things that I did being a scientist and then getting into leadership in academia, leadership in healthcare, and then ultimately becoming a CEO of two different organizations, and now actually serving on boards of a number of different organizations, both early stage and publicly traded. If you had asked me when I was 15 years old or 25 or maybe even 30, if these are the things I would do, I would say absolutely no way. That's not what I want to do. But each time, when these opportunities come to you, you start to see a different, because you're just, from my perspective, just following what really interested me. And most importantly, where I thought I could have an impact on people, a positive impact on people, the decisions became relatively easy. So yeah, I don't sweat what the path's going to be. Just follow your desire.
In one sentence, how you would describe yourself?
I would describe myself as service-oriented and committed.
And the last question I always ask to my guests, who I should interview next.
I think you should interview Steve Klasko.
With great pleasure.
He's not oncology. That's the caveat. If you want an oncology person, they'll give you somewhere different.
No.
But if you want like a healthcare leader who just who really, I mean, this is a reason why he's such a big national figure, a healthcare figure who thinks differently, he's that guy.
I'll ask for your introduction.
Yeah. He's an executive in residence now at General Catalyst. So here's the thing about Steve Klasko. So OBGYN becomes a dean and then a university president and then president of Jefferson Health and Thomas Jefferson University. And then decide, and he's an MD, MBA from Wharton, right?
Yeah.
And then at 70 decides he's going to go to law school because he doesn't like the whole way that he feels like entrepreneurship needs better lawyers. So he gets his law degree and he goes in the venture capital world. The guy's not going to slow down ever. So I think he's a model of one.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to OncoDaily on YouTube. Hit the bell icon to stay updated.